What up, Wizards? It's Dev, Mtg. We like it in Magic, especially on days like this, because it's the one we've all been waiting for. Cat Powers. Dominaria United preview season is finally here after a lot of waiting, so I know you guys don't want to wait any longer to see some of the cards. Let's go ahead and jump into the 30-something cards Wizards gave us to gawk at today. Now let's start with Join Forces, Shalai's Acolyte, and Charismatic Vanguard first here. Join Forces is 3 mana, 2 and a white for an instant, untap up to 2 target creatures, they each get +2/+2 to EOT. And that's not good. It's probably not very good. Even in Limited, that's kind of a lot to pay for a combat trait, but you could blow some people out with it. Shalai's Acolyte, a little expensive too. This is 4 and a white for a 3/4 angel with kicker, 1 and a green. If you kick it, it gets 2+1/+1 counters. So 5 mana for a 3/4 or 7 mana for a 5/6. You know, either way, you're kind of paying a lot, but I wouldn't be surprised if you wanted like one of these in a lot of your limited decks. Charismatic Vanguard is also 3 mana, just like Join Forces, but it's a little beefier. This is 2 and a white for a 3/2 Dwarf Soldier. And you can pay 4 and a white to have creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. We've seen dudes like this in Limited before, and that's where they belong. These just really aren't worth talking about in Constructed, so I won't. Let's move on to Micromancer, Impede Momentum, and Territorial Morrow. These are a little bit more interesting. Commons and uncommons, right? Territorial Morrow is the 5 mana possible 10/10 that Morrow himself was talking about in the teaser. You get it? Of course he mentioned this card. This is 4 and a green for a star elemental with Domain. We called it, baby. We actually called a couple of things in the set so far. My record's looking okay with my predictions, but Domain is in this set. And if you're unfamiliar with Domain, that means a creature or whatever gets a bonus for how many basic land types you control. In this case, his power and toughness are each equal to twice the number of basic land types that you control. So he can be a 10/10. You got 4 of them. He's an 8/8, and so forth and so on. So just kind of a vanilla duder. He's pretty easy to cast, though. If you want a 10/10, it's a lot easier to cast like a Gigantosaurus. So he's not like terrible looking, but he's also kind of terrible looking. So I'll move on to Impede Momentum. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a sorcery. Tap target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. And you also get to scry 1. This isn't too bad at all. You know, the sorcery speed is kind of lame. If it was an instant speed card, it'd be like much, much better. But still, for your mono blue and blue X tempo decks, this looks pretty good. And I like, by the way, how they've named this card. Like, oh, we need a card that's good for tempo decks. What do tempo decks do? Oh, they impede momentum, so let's just call a card that. And honestly, I don't think this is too bad, right? We've seen a lot of these blue auras that tap creatures down, and they're usually not playable at all. But in this case, your opponent can't bust it. It just lasts like 3 turns, and then they get to untap their guy. But in the meantime, they have to bounce it or flicker it or something if they want to unstun the guy or, you know, untap it somehow, which isn't super hard. But either way, this is a little bit more stable than your typical blue aura that taps because it's a little bit more reliable, and I like that. The Scry 1's not bad either. And finally, the tragedy that is Micromancer. This is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 human wizard, and when it ETBs, you may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with mana value 1, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So this is neat, but that's about all it is. You know, I imagine if there's some decent 1-drop instants and sorceries in Limited, maybe this is fine because it's a hill giant. You get fine stats. Not good, but fine. And then you go grab a removal spell or something. You know, it could be worse. Now in Standard, it can grab Duress or Fading Hope, which isn't the worst idea in the world for like your Leer deck, right? Because it goes on turn 4 and grabs the Fading Hope. That's going to be really important once you get your Leer down, right? So I guess that's a cool idea, but then you have to play this card in your deck. You probably just use the slots on something better. So, and what's funny is the farther you go back in history, you know, Historic, Explorer, Pioneer, Modern especially, this card starts getting a little bit better because there's way better 1-drops, but especially in those formats, it's priced way out. And I think it's priced way out in Standard, to be honest, but if that's the case, then obviously in formats where it can cast Lightning Bolt, it's just way too expensive. And it can't even cast it, it just gets it back. Or just tutors it for you. So I'm just not sure how good this card actually is, but it is tempting. But some of my favorite non-legendary, I guess we'll say, commons and uncommons from today were Resolute Reinforcements, along with Neshoba Brawler and Banalish Sleeper. Banalish Sleeper is 2 mana. It's 1 and a white for a 3/1 Phyrexian human soldier, with kicker black. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, each player sacrifices a creature. So it's a 2 mana 3/1. It's not the best, it's not super special, but you can cast it as a 2 mana 3/1. Or it can just be like a Fleshbag Marauder for Orzhov and a colorless. And that's like pretty good. Like, it's really not bad at all to have like a modal, basically, Phyrexian or not Firexion, actually, there's like 5 cards like this, but take your pick, you know, it's not quite a Plague Crafter, but Fleshbag Marauder or something like that. There's been plenty of times where I would have liked to cast a Fleshbag Marauder and not have to sack a guy. And this is what this does, and you even get like a discount on it if you want to cast it that way. So I think this is actually like way better than it looks in a lot of ways. So kind of a big fan of this, but I also really like Nishoba here. Brawler is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a star 3 cat warrior with trample, and it has domain, so its power is equal to the number of basic land types you control. That's actually kind of sweet. This reminds me a bit of like a Wild Nacatl or something like that. And on turn 2, it's very likely just going to be a 2 power or a 1/3 possibly even, right? But in decks where it can get up to even just a 3/3, right? Your Naya decks or your, you know, green 3-color aggro decks, if that's a potential thing that we can do. And I think maybe it is. Then this actually can be pretty powerful, even just as 2 mana 3/3. You know, it's a replacement for your Werewolf Pack Leader. But there's other decks. You know, imagine a 4-color aggro deck, but this is a 2 mana 4/3, and that's pretty good. So I'm not sure if this is exactly where it needs to be for standard, but even as a 2 mana 2/3, it could be decent, and it does grow as you play things. So even if it's a 2/3 the turn you played, it's a 3/3 the next turn, potential 4/3 the next turn. So it could be a little bit better than it looks because it just kind of looks meh, but trust me, this might be okay. Aside from that, though, Resolute Reinforcements is pretty serious looking to me. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 1/1 human soldier with flash. And when it ETBs, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So it's Raise the Alarm that you can blink or bounce or whatever. And that's pretty good. Like, just the fact that this has flash makes it halfway decent. You know, you ambush something, the token can block and die, and you keep the guy out for, you know, just shenanigans later. Even if you don't have shenanigans, Raise the Alarm just by itself is kind of a good card. It just kind of is. I've wanted Raise the Alarm back for a long time now for multiple reasons. You know, we got Join the Dance, and it's not quite Raise the Alarm and all that. The instant speed makes this huge difference. So really happy to have this card back, I want to say. But again, I don't want to call it strictly better than Raise the Alarm. Sure, there's plenty of, you know, decks that really care about tokens. Like Raise the Alarm would be better with Jenny Faye. But this card is still pretty good with Jenny Faye when you think about it. So, like, it's not bad. I think this could end up seeing some play, depending on what decks it wants to be in. Oh yeah, and we also got Lightning Strike today. I should point that out. Pretty good reprint. By the way, props to whoever it was in my chat the other night, literally last night, that said Lightning Strike is probably what they'll do. You called it. Points go to you. Good job. Lightning Strike is, in fact, what they did. This is a good card. Just a solid little magic card that's going to end up in tons and tons of decks. But the very last uncommon from today is a legend. We're going to take a look at Raph. Raph is here, everybody. The Weatherlight Stalwart. This is just 2 mana, white and a blue for a 1/3 legendary human wizard. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do that, you get to draw a card. And you can also pay 3 and 2 white to have creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance till end of turn. So cute little mana sink there. That's not too bad. If you got enough mana, you get Wandering Emperor protection. All you guys get vigilance, and you get an Anthem. But 5 mana is a lot. You also have to have a good number of creatures and a good number of instants and sorceries. This is one of those situations where Raise the Alarm might actually be better, right? Because it's an instant and sorcery, and it's also 2 creatures that you could tap when you cast more instants and sorceries. So shut my mouth immediately. This is a good example of why it's not, you know, Resolute Reinforcements wouldn't be better, strictly better than Raise the Alarm, but still, you know, there's plenty of other instants and sorceries in the format that make creatures that you can then tap to draw cards with this. And it's just a cute little dude, but there's a reason he's uncommon. I'm almost fooled by the 2 mana price tag on this because that's actually like really, really cheap to get started, but it's still, I think that it's one of those cards that requires just the right mix of instants and sorceries, and that's not probably. In those decks, you're already playing like Delver of Secrets and Illuminator Virtuoso and Stormchaser Drake and like all of those cards. And do you really have room for this? And do you really want to tap those guys down when you cast instants of sorceries? No, you probably want to attack with them and stuff. So I'm just not sure that this card goes in the deck that it wants, that like already exists and it wants to be in. But any 2 mana dude that can draw you cards is probably at least worth looking at, so there's that. But let's move into the rares and mythics now, and I hope that didn't take too long to get to this point of the video because there's some really nuts stuff. So let's attempt to approach these in somewhat ascending order, although that's going to be a little tough. This means I have to give a special prize to the worst rare of the day, which is tough to do because they all look at least interesting, if not good. But one of the cards that fits that tag, I guess, the most is the Phasing of Zhalfir. Really love that this storyline got a saga. That's really cool, but probably could be better. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for a saga. Right. It also has Read Ahead. Choose a chapter and start with that many lore counters. Add one after your draw step. Skip chapters, don't trigger, sacrifice after 3. That's kind of important when evaluating this card. On the first 2 chapters, another target non-land permanent phases out. It can't phase in for as long as you control the Phasing of Zhalfir. But on chapter 3, you destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token. Now, Read Ahead makes this a little bit better than it probably looks at first glance, and I've had to take multiple takes, because I actually said Breed Ahead one time, which is, I don't know, kind of appropriate considering what the Phyrexians are doing here, but being able to skip ahead to destroy all creatures is actually kind of sick. And yes, this is another card that Morrow specifically pointed out in his teaser, and this is another one I take credit for calling. I specifically said in the teaser video, it's going to destroy all guys and give a 2/2 for each creature that was destroyed this way, and that's exactly what it does. Look at that. But on the first couple of chapters, you can either, I guess, make some breathing room by phasing out a couple of guys, which doesn't make sense because you just skip ahead and kill all the guys, right? Maybe there's situational reasons why you might want to phase out opposing creatures, but of course you get to protect your own guys with the first couple of chapters of this if you have some time before the 3rd chapter goes off. You can even just skip ahead to chapter 2, protect one guy, right, and then next turn it goes off and kills everything, but your one guy is still safe. So there's a lot of ways to use this card, right? It's basically modal, considering that's what Read Ahead effectively does. So that's actually really exciting. And some of the sagas in this set that have Read Ahead could be phenomenal, but I'm not sure that this is one of them. Again, the modal nature, or just really, again, modal, choose whichever you want, is really sweet, and that's something I wish we retroactively had on every single saga. I guess we'll take a look at Herd Migration next. This is 7 mana, 6 and a green for a sorcery with Domain. Create a 3/3 green beast creature token for each basic land type among lands you control. You can also pay 1 and a green and discard Herd Migration to search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and you gain 3 life. Now, I'm actually kind of nervous making this the second rare we talk about today, because actually this card is really good. I'm pretty sure this card is fine, it's not quite Revitalize on the channel mode. That's basically channel, right? It's kind of what we're doing with this. But getting a basic land and 3 life on turn 2 to make sure you hit your 3-drop, getting whatever color that you need to fix your mana, that's all actually really good. And here's the thing, guys. You'll cast it for 7 mana sometimes. You rip it off the top of your library and compare it then to a Mascot Exhibition. Mascot Exhibition makes what? 7, 8, 10 power? And this has the potential to make 15 power, which is pretty good for 7 mana. I mean, how many times in the last 2 years or year and a half have you cast a Mascot Exhibition? For a lot of us, it's in the at least dozens, and for some of us special people, it's in the hundreds. So just think about that and consider you might actually cast this card a few times, even if you only have 4 basic land types in play. Whoa, I only got 12 powers. So I think this card could be potentially game-ending and even better in a lot of ways at the beginning of the game. So I think, kind of a sleeper hit here. But let's take a look next at Astorbearer of Blades. This card is probably objectively worse than the card we just looked at. The more I think of Herd Migration, the more I think that card's actually beastly, but Astor is 4 mana. This is 2 in Boros color, so red and a white, for a 4/4 legendary human warrior. When Bearer of Blades enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card from among them, put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Equipments you control have Equip 1. Vehicles you control have Crew 1. So we just keep going through all the cards that Morrow teased the other day. If you didn't see that video, you should have. Go back. We called it all. I did say this might be on a legendary creature. Here we go. Of course it's on a legendary dude, but it cost a little bit much. It really does. But I actually think this might have a chance, right? It's got a great enter the battlefield trigger, whether you're playing equipment, vehicles, or both, but especially if you're playing vehicles, because this could drop directly into the Mardu vehicles deck that's tearing up a couple of formats right now in the arena, right? I think both Historic and Explorer are plagued by the Grease Fang Vehicles deck that will reanimate a Parhelion 2 on like turn 3 and swing with it, right? So this could drop just deliciously into that deck. Make sure you get your Parhelion or any other vehicles that you might need just with the ETB trigger, but it also makes all your vehicles extremely easy to crew, right? So that's great. And if you do happen to have some equipment, like let's say your Colossus Hammer aficionado, right? You're a real Saffron Olive and you want to play Hammer, then this card easily makes it Hammer time on turn 4 or 5 or whatever. So just a slick little dude here that I think actually does a lot more than it looks like. We've been trained to not think 4 mana 4/4s are very good, but when it gives you this kind of ETB, card selection, replaces itself with one of potentially the most important cards in your deck and makes everything a lot easier once it's on the table, probably a decent card. Now, let's look at Joyra next, the Ageless Innovator. 2 mana, a blue and a red for a 2/3 Legendary Human Artificer. You can tap Joyra to put 2 Ingenuity counters on her, and then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of Ingenuity counters on Joyra. What an awesome commander. That's probably what this card really does and is destined for, but even in Standard, this could be a bomb of a card, especially once we hit the Brothers' War. In just a couple of months, I think Brothers' War comes out in like November, so it won't be long until we get, very likely, just this huge influx of new great artifacts. So keep your eyes on Joyra in pretty much every format she's available to be played in. I mean, you play her on turn 2 in like Modern, and she kind of is bolt bait, but if she stays on the table for even a turn, you get a free 2-cost artifact. The next turn you get a free 4-cost artifact, and that's where things start getting very dangerous. So this card is actually probably pretty good, but just the fact that it doesn't really do much the turn it enters the battlefield makes me dock it a couple of points. But for the most part, just as a 2 mana, 2/3 resistant to shock effects and stuff like that, might be decent in Standard if your entire deck is built around artifacts, and that could be a real reality very soon. So I would keep an eye on Joyra, is all I'm saying. Now next, let's look at another 2 mana legend. It's the Raven. The Raven Man! Finally! I guess this is the guy that Mark Rosewater was talking about when he said, we're going to give a character a card, that you've been asking for a card for this character forever. You could argue there's actually multiple versions of that character that we've already seen today, but I'd say the Raven Man is probably the one he was talking about. But here's the thing, guys. I'm a little whelmed by this card. This is just 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 2/1 Legendary Human Wizard. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, you create a 1/1 black bird creature token with flying that can't block. And you can also pay 3 and a black and tap the Raven Man to have each opponent discard a card. You can only do that as a sorcery. Okay, so he's okay. He's really not terrible, I compare him a bit to Jadar. And Jadar sees a bit of play here and there, but Jadar basically procs like every turn, almost guaranteed, and this doesn't, but it can proc on your opponent's turn if you force them to discard cards. Why is his ability sorcery speed then? Because making someone discard a card during their draw step every turn would be the most annoying thing, and once you get them down to 0 cards, you're basically locking them out of the game forever until they draw instant speed removal. So, there's reasons why it has to be a sorcery speed activated ability. I'm not going to yell too much about that, but still, it can proc twice every turn cycle. And hopefully you can discard something for cheap, or especially, hopefully, for free on your turn to guarantee that this procs and give you a flyer. So it's not bad. Again, 2 mana is a great starting cost on this thing too. So it's not the worst stats in the world, but what would be worse stats of this 2 mana 1/1? That's Jadar, and even that sees play, so at least this wins the stat battle, right? But, in specifically discard decks, this is fine, right? And in decks where you're going to be discarding some cards, pretty good too. So I'm not going to say the card is bad. It has its niche, and in a way, those are the cards I really tend to like. Now, from this point on, most cards are just good. Actually, from a couple of cards ago, most cards today are just solid, good cards that are good to get excited about. So let's look next at Braids. We knew Braids was coming back, but oh my god, we're only halfway through the previews today, and already the the nostalgia is hitting super hard, dude. But Braids Arisen Nightmare is 3 mana, 1 and 2 black for a 3/3 legendary creature. It's a nightmare. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who does not do that, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. Honestly, it's amazing. It's good that this is a May ability because otherwise you can just like sack a land and force your opponent. You strip mine your opponent every single turn. And that would be a little powerful. But honestly, when you do have extra lands, forcing that decision on them and like maybe you get to draw a card, it's pretty good too, right? Like in a situation where your opponent doesn't have any creatures but you have a little dude to sacrifice, this gets okay. And obviously when you have a little dude to sacrifice and they have a Titan of Industry, this gets incredible. Right? You know, if you have a Planeswalker on 1 and they have a Planeswalker on 6, it gets really good. So there's a lot of ways this card could be absolutely phenomenal, and it curves well into a number of things in this format too, right? Like it curves into Sorin, which can make creatures to sacrifice to it, and you know, stuff like that is going to matter a lot. It's also pretty decent in a deck with like Invoke Despair, right? Because this is doing some damage and drawing cards, Invoke Despair is doing some damage and drawing cards, and suddenly you got a mono black deck that draws a good number of cards and forces some very awkward decisions on opponents. So I really like this. I know that a 3-mana 3/3 isn't the best stat line in the world, but it's really all about what this card does once it's on the table, and it will annoy your opponent to death. It might not be as powerful as some versions of Braids that we've seen, but it's still going to be a nuisance. But up next is Nemada, Primeval Guardian. Just a solid, I like cards like this, just a solid looking Magic card. 4 mana, 2 in Golgari colors, a black and a green, for a 3/4 legendary treefolk with reach. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. You can pay green and sack a Saproling to have Nemada get +2/+2 till end of turn. You can also pay 1 and a black and sack 2 saps to draw a card. I think this card might be sneakily, like, super good. Like, very, very good. Both mana sink abilities are fantastic on it, right? But even the static ability, like the passive ability on it, is great, even though I kind of hate it. I tend not to love, you know, creatures exile when they die, you know, static abilities and stuff like that. I want my creatures to go into the graveyard, you know. So I don't really want to see this on the other side of the table, which probably makes it a decent card. 4 mana is a lot to pay for that ability, though, a lot of the time. But good thing is it's got other abilities. When your opponent's dudes die, they exile, and you get saps, and those saps can draw you cards, which is the really good part of this. So just, again, maybe a solid little dude to fill out the 4-drop slot in Golgari or Black-Green X decks that are mid-range oriented, you know. Again, these kind of... One of the reasons I like this card so much is that it's a card for The Rock, which is an old-school Golgari mid-range deck that just featured, like, solid, aggressively costed creatures and good removal, you know, just card draw and stuff like just decent card advantage, enter the battlefield triggers and stuff like that to get incremental value on your opponent. And this card is that deck. It's just like... this card is the poster child for a deck like that, and we're moving into a standard where that kind of mid-range deck looks more and more possible, so I think this card might be one to look at. Also, anytime you mention Saprolings, I pop like your mom, so I've got to be excited about this one. But let's move on to... They just keep coming with the hits, baby. Squee the King, Dubious Monarch. Squee, what... Maybe I'm not caught up on the story here. What is he king of? I love that he's a king, but still. 3 mana, 2 in a red, for a 2/2 legendary Goblin Noble. He's a 2/2 now, guys. He really has grown in power. He also has haste. He's really, you know, gotten serious and gotten motivated in his later years and gotten haste. Also, here's the good part. Whenever Squee Dubious Monarch attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. But the really, really good part of the card, the actual Squee part of the card, you may cast Squee Dubious Monarch from your graveyard by paying 3 in a red and exiling 4 other cards from your yard rather than paying its mana cost. So at some point, Squee learned a little bit from the Goblin Rabblemaster and like other cards like it. It's like a worse Goblin Rabblemaster in a lot of ways. But Goblin Rabblemaster can't keep coming back from your graveyard over and over. I would imagine that in some aggro decks, this is going to come back from your graveyard at least once in a game, and that might be all you need, because as soon as it comes back, it immediately swings for effectively 3, right? And if you have any Goblin Anthem effects or anything like that out, then it's swinging for like 5. That's really, really good. So you know, I think this might actually be really sweet in the red aggro decks. You can only play a few copies of it. I don't know that you're running 4 or anything, but in some ways, it sideways replaces a card like Den of the Bugbear, right? Is this like reach in the late game that is sweeper resistant and all that? So I really like the look of this, and obviously, if you can swing multiple times with a Squee, you're getting multiple 1/1s. That's really good too. So it's a solid looking card right here. I mean, people occasionally play like Relic Robber, you know, in their Goblin decks, and it was actually a better card than it looked like. And this is another card that if you look at sideways, kind of a Relic Robber. Again, in some ways, right? So I kind of really like this, and I think it does have a shot at seeing play in some red-based aggro decks. I just love that they made Squee aggressive. It doesn't seem like a very aggressive dude, but I guess he got aggressive and became king. Lesson for all of us. But let's move on here, because maybe the most important rares of the day aren't the most interesting, but they're definitely maybe the best cards we saw all day in a way, and those are the Painlands. We called Domain, we called Painlands. Subscribe to this channel if you want a dude that can see the future, but either way, we get these, and they're a lot better in some ways than Pathways. If you're a newer player and these look really bad to you, like they did to me back in the day, they're not. They're actually very good. They are untapped dual lands, yes, at a price, but when you think about it, these are shocks. These are shock lands. You have to pay 2 mana for an 2 life for an untapped shock land, right? So this, you get to tap twice before it does as much damage as a shock land would to you, right? And that's, I'm telling you, basically any land, shock lands, fetch lands, these that do damage to you, but get you multiple colors of mana, they're basically always good. And I wanted these so bad. Super glad we got them. These will make 2 and even 3 color aggro decks a reality. And they're kind of the kind of card that Control doesn't necessarily want to play. These are 3 and 4 color Control decks, but in a way that's a good thing, you know? Lands that Control didn't want to play against just exited the format. These, you know, creature lands. Control tends to really hate those. I like playing with them, yes, they're good win conditions, but they also hate playing against them. So those leave the format, and that's good for Control. But these come into the format, so now if Control wants to play 3 colors, it has to play a card it doesn't want to play rather than play against a card it doesn't want to play against. So that's a nice little counterbalance if you think about it as sideways as I have thought about it. Control decks will still exist, but it'll cost some life for your mana in those decks. But one way or the other, the real winners here are the 2-color aggro decks that get to play, really, again, cards that are just better than Pathways because you don't have to pick and choose what colors you want. Also, I pointed this out on Twitter, but I have to say it here again, too. Sulphurous Springs. I even said that I wanted the old art on Sulphurous Springs, and they kind of did that for me, right? The little demon lady, I think it's a lady. I'm pretty sure that's a lady. But either way, the little demon that's sitting in the hot tub has been in there so long that they are now just a skeleton. And I think that that is the height of comedy. Thank you for that, Wizards of the Coast. Honestly, if nothing else, successful set. Congratulations, guys. You did it. But before we get to the mythics, there are 3 more rares, I think, that we have to look at that I think are not only some of the more interesting rares of the day, but they're interesting, okay, listen to me, because they're not interesting. These are just like rares that are just super obviously good. They're kind of dry because they're obviously good, but they're so obviously good even though not broken. None of these look broken to me, but they're so obviously like standard playable in their way that I think that they are some of the strongest cards we'll talk about. Not just today, but in the set. So let's take a look at these real quick. Let's look at Radha's Firebrand first. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 3/1 human warrior. When it attacks, target creature defending player controls with power less than Firebrand's power cannot block this turn. That's all it needs to say, but it says more than that. It has Domain, 5 and a red. Radha's Firebrand gets +2/+2 till end of turn. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type you control. Activate only once each turn. Okay, so again, all it has to be is a 2 mana 3/1 that negates a creature from blocking. That's actually, again, maybe if you're a newer player, you're just not an aggro player. That's really good. Just like that in and of itself is a fantastic ability. Negate your, keep your opponent's fattest dude from blocking against your aggro deck is good. Just is, right? But the Domain ability is better than it looks too. Like in a Gruul aggro deck, or just any 2-color aggro deck, Boros, right? In a 2-color aggro deck, this ability effectively costs 4 mana once you have a Plains and a Mountain out. And that's not bad. It's not as good of an activated ability as like Werewolf Pack Leader, but still think to yourself, mono green player, how many times have you activated Werewolf Pack Leader? Kind of a lot. Like, again, in the dozens or even hundreds if that's the only deck that you played all season. And Werewolf Pack Leader is 4 to activate, and I think most of the time this is probably going to cost 4 to activate. In your 3-color aggro decks, which again, it looks like one of those is really coming together, this only costs 3 to activate, and that's like phenomenal. You get a 6-power guy in that case for 3 mana threat of activation. And even though 3 mana is kind of a lot, again, we've activated more expensive stuff on creatures in aggro decks in the last couple of years. Threat of activation on this is relatively high. It needs to be blocked, but oops, keeps creature from blocking. So like the biggest dude over there that could block your potential 5-4 or 5-3 or whatever, it can't block. So this card is actually more of a headache than it looks like, and it's probably going to lead to a lot more damage than it looks like too. I'm a big fan of this. But let's keep it moving. We got to look at Archangel of Wrath next. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a 3/4 angel with kicker, black and or red. It has flying and lifelink. And when it ETBs, if it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to any target. And if it was kicked twice, it deals an additional 2 damage to any target. Mark my words, this card is amazing. I'm pretty sure this card is really good. For 6 mana, it can take out 1 big thing, or importantly, I think, 2 small things. For 5 mana, you can take out 1 small thing. It can also just hit your opponent in the face. It can finish off a Planeswalker for 6 mana, or even for 5 mana some of the time. But against aggro decks and the like, especially when you're on the play, you'll just sometimes play this for like 4 mana, right? Because it's a 3/4 flying lifelink. It blocks a lot of stuff, brick walls aggro, gains you a bunch of life back, and the later in the game that you draw it, the more likely it is to just pick off this or that, right? In certain decks, it might just deal the last couple of damage to your opponent, right? Like, if you have 6 mana, this is going to come down and just shoot your opponent for 4. Like, that's really not terrible, So I really actually like this card. I think it's very versatile, very scalable, and even if you pay 6 mana for your 3/4 flyer, that's normally not good. But a 6 mana 3/4 flyer that, Flame Tongue Kabu's a thing and has lifelink is like kind of unbelievable. Almost no matter what mode you choose on this card, it's probably at least halfway decent or all the way up to like broken. Game winning, depending on what life your opponent's at too. So just like whether it's, doming your opponent, killing planeswalkers, taking out 2 small guys, 1 big guy, or just being a brick wall against small dudes, like this card looks phenomenal to me. So, and it's really good to blink too, by the way. I shouldn't have to point that out, but bouncing it is one thing, but blinking it is even better because blink effects tend to be relatively cheap. So you blink this, comes back, you get to shoot for 4 again, I wish Teleportation Circle wasn't rotating because this card looks phenomenal with effects like that. So touch the Spirit Realm in your deck. That can either, exile a thing, or if you just channel it and target your angel, and suddenly you can, 4 of something else. So this card just looks absolutely boss to your dude. So again, keep an eye on this. I'm not sure if this is a sleeper or not. I don't know if other people like this card. I really don't, but to me, this looks like an extremely impactful piece of cardboard. But you know what else does? Guardian of New Benalia. I kind of don't like that this card exists in some ways, but here it is. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier with Enlist. As this creature attacks, you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning sickness. When you do, add its power to this creature's power until end of turn. Whenever Guardian of New Benalia enlists a creature, you scry 2. And, that wouldn't necessarily even be good enough. If it was just that, the card would just be kind of like neat, but okay. But it's this. This is the bit. Discard a card. Guardian of New Benalia gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. So Seasoned Hallowblade is back to haunt my nightmares and the rest of yours. What we took what, like 1.5 seasons off from Seasoned Hallowblade, and she's already back. Like, what are we doing? I'm so mad. This will be a good discard outlet for decks that want to discard cards. Hey, it works pretty well with the Raven Man, right? You discard a card for free, 1/1 bird or whatever. But and you're not attacking with Raven Man most of the time, so you just tap your Raven Man. This gets +2/+2/+2. So that's not bad. And you get to Scry 2. Scry 2 on enlisting is pretty good in an aggro deck where you really want to fix your draws, right? So that Scry 2 is probably way better than it looks. Enlist is probably a little weaker than it looks because you can't tap a summoning sick guy which would probably make the ability like a million times better. But you have to actively not attack with a dude you would otherwise want to attack with, unless, of course, again, it's a situation where you have either a Raven Man or, a Fiend Hunter type creature. Why can't I remember the name? Banisher Priest or Skyclave Apparition or the one that's in Standard. Maybe I've just gone ahead and wiped my mind clear. Brutal Cathar. It's a Brutal Cathar. You don't want to attack with those guys, but you can tap them, add their power to this guy, so that's good in and of itself. But really, it's the Seasoned Hallowblade ability on this that makes me want to pull what little remains of my hair out. I rock what's something between a Benjamin Franklin and an Al Yankovic these days, and I don't have a whole lot of hair left, but I imagine this card is going to be responsible for the rest of it being gone. Also, by the way, something else that I'm kind of ticked off about with this card, Seasoned Hallowblade, uncommon. A lot of cards like this, uncommon. This card, rare. Kind of lame, but still, very good, very impactful card that we at least have to bring up. And in some ways, it might be, I keep having to sound like a broken record, but one of the best cards of the day, easy. But let's get into the Mythics, baby! And that means we have to pick a worst Mythic, too. And I really hate to do this to my dude. One of my favorite Planeswalkers of all time. But I gotta give it to a Ajani Sleeper Agent. Now, I could be very, very wrong, because this could cost just 3 mana to cast, the way that it works. See, this is technically 4 mana. It's 1, a green, and a white, and then a green-white hybrid of Phyrexian mana. So, whenever a Planeswalker is completed, I guess we saw this on Tamiyo too, you get Phyrexian hybrid mana. So this could be 3 mana to cast, or it could be 4 mana to cast. Those are both okay. Those are both, 3 especially is very good, but this is a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. You can +1 Ajani to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or Planeswalker card, put it in your hand, otherwise put it on the bottom of your library. You can -3 Ajani to distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among up to 3 target creatures. They gain Vigilance until end of turn. You can also -6 Ajani to get an emblem with whenever you cast a creature or Planeswalker spell, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. So I wouldn't have picked Ajani as being the card that cares about poison counters from Mara's teasers, but it's Ajani. Look, I don't go thinking that I don't like this card. I do. I really like this card a lot, actually. The ultimate is easy to get to. Easier than most, at least. And if you cast it on turn 3, the ultimate might be incredibly easy to get to. And then your opponent's got an emblem. They can't just kill your Finn and then they never get poison counters. They have an emblem. They have to deal with that. So, the emblem in and of itself, the ultimate, I'll actually talk about. I usually don't really bring up the ultimate too much on Planeswalkers. This one's fairly easy to get to relatively early in the game, so there is that. However, you might whiff. If you don't get card advantage off of this, you hit a land or something, that doesn't feel good. I don't know if this is the worst Mythic of the day, but if it is, it's still kind of a playable Mythic. This is not a bad looking card to me. Don't mistake me making this the first Mythic we talk about. Don't mistake that for me thinking it's a bad card. Hedge those bets, Dev. But anyway, let's look at a 5 mana blue Mythic creature here. There's 2 of those today. And they actually both look kind of okay. Defiler of Dreams is 5 mana. This is 3 and 2 blue for a 4/3 Phyrexian Sphinx. I'll learn how to English it. Well, Phyrexian isn't English, to my credit. It's a Phyrexian Sphinx with flying, and it's a 4/3. As an additional cost to cast blue permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost blue less to cast if you pay life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of blue mana that you pay. Blue is English. I should have nailed that by now. Whenever you cast a blue permanent spell, draw a card. Solid. It's really not bad. I mean, I don't like the 3 toughness in a lightning strike format, so that very likely keeps it from seeing too much play. But this effectively gives all your blue permanent spells, that's a very important word to note, Phyrexian mana. 1 blue Phyrexian mana in their mana cost. You can't pay more than, from what I understand, you can't pay more than 1 blue in Phyrexian mana. So that's not bad. You can play this on curve on turn 5 and then drop a land next turn, play Jin Gitaxias for the cost of 2 life. So there's that. But something tells me in your mono blue big fat dudes deck that drew a 5 and 7 drop in its opening hand, you probably don't have that life to spend in most games, but still. It's not a terrible looking card. Being able to draw a card whenever you cast a blue permanent is very sweet. And There's also the fact that, like, you could play a number of decent blue 1-drops. Like, let's say you're playing Witness Protection in your deck. That's a card I actually really, really like, and is in my mono blue mid-range deck anyway. We need a card to replace Imrith, a 5-drop flyer. So this could actually be a decent replacement for Imrith in that deck, because you could just play Witness Protection for free on the same turn that you play this, and that's actually not the worst sequence in the world. So, and you get to draw a card too. You pay 2 life, neutralize a creature, get a free Witness Protection, and draw a card. All sounds like a decent deal on 5 to me. So this card actually has some decent lines, but I'm still not sure it's quite cut out for a format where Lightning Strike is going to be an important card. But let's look at another 5-mana blue mythic flyer today, and honestly, 4 to 7 mana blue mythic creatures that fly are almost never like truly good. But honestly, I think we got a couple of contenders today, baby. So let's look at Sphinx of Clear Skies for this next card. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue for a 5/5 Sphinx with flying and ward 2. And it has domain. Whenever Sphinx of Clear Skies deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So on a full domain grip, you get a Factor Fiction, which is pretty good on combat damage. If it was on attacks, that'd be way better. Had to double check the card just then to make sure, but even just on dealing combat damage, it's really still fine. It's still fine. This replaces Imrith even more because it's got ward. It always has the ward too. If you tap it down to attack, it still has ward, which in some ways is just better than Imrith. And in some cases, if you're in a 3-color deck or whatever, it can draw you like 2 cards. Even if it just draws you 1 card, it's going to draw you a better card than the other 2 cards that your opponent had to split. If you've never had to play against Factor Fiction, that card is very good. So even at, put it this way, even at 1 basic land type, even if you're playing this in your mono blue deck, you just have a bunch of islands, it still reads draw a card. 5 mana, 5/5, flying, ward 2. When it deals combat damage, draw a card. It's still like basically Imrith. In a lot of ways, that's still Imrith. So I really actually kind of like this card. I think it's better than it looks, especially in decks. Like, honestly, I'm willing to play, in my mono blue deck, I'm willing to play a bunch of, like, random other basic lands, like one of each other basic lands, just to occasionally hit, domain 3 on this and draw 2 cards off of it, usually. So that's another thing with Factor Fiction, is that sometimes your opponent will make one of the piles much stronger than the other, and it'll just be like 1 really strong card and then 3 really kind of mediocre cards. In a lot of cases, it's still better to take the 3 mediocre cards. You want the card advantage, but sometimes you just want to win the game, so you take the strong card. Either way, Factor Fiction is a very good Magic card. When it's stapled to a 5/5 flyer that's hard to target and is at least somewhat decently costed, I'll take it. I've talked about this card way too long, but that's because I kind of believe in it. Let's look at the World Spell next. I really considered making this the worst, quote-unquote, worst mythic of the day, but the fact that you can read ahead on this actually, again, makes it way too tempting. This is 7 mana. This is 5 and 2 green for a saga with read ahead. The first 2 chapters are, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-saga permanent card from among them, put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. On Chapter 3, you may put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So for 7 mana, you could have your wildest dreams in terms of mana value. I mean, I guess you're technically... You can play Omniscience and another permanent. And you're still getting a 2 mana discount on Omniscience for 7 mana, right? Actually, once you play Omniscience, you can play anything for free. So it doesn't really matter that you get other mana value off of it. But still, this can cast and just throw an Ulamog down in other formats and stuff. I mean, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. And even in Standard, if all you do is throw down like 2 7 mana guys, you're still getting like 14 mana value off of it. And how bad is that? Not bad, it turns out. And that's just if you read ahead. If you don't read ahead, you get to get card advantage up to 2 times. Really, you get card selection the 1 time. And then it starts generating card advantage if you, use both chapters. I also like the idea, this is sneaky. I like the idea that if you play it on chapter 1, you get the card selection immediately. You tapped out. So there's that. But you get the card selection, best card from the top 7. And then on chapter 2, the next turn, you get to do the same thing, but now you're completely untapped. And I think that's actually a big deal. Card might be better than it looks, especially with things like Brilliant Restoration in the format that can just bring it immediately back from the graveyard. Still at the cost of 7 mana. Theoretically, you get a bunch of other stuff back too. So it could be a 1 or 2 of in those decks. It could be a 1 or 2 of in the 5-color like Kami War decks. I just want to throw down like 2 copies of Kami War or a copy of Kami War and a Titan of Industry at the same time. I'm telling you, this card could see some play, but it looks a little rickety. I'm not too sure. It's not that it looks, frail or anything. It's just that 7 mana is so much mana. It's just so much mana. So I imagine the decks that get the most juice out of this are going to be the ones that cheat it into play somehow. But if you can cheat it into play, it's phenomenal. So I wouldn't count it out just yet. But let's move on. I really have been talking too long about some maybe not too impactful cards. But let's look next at Sheoldred. It's back. It's Sheoldred the Apocalypse. Really cool name for a card. 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for a 4/5 legendary Phyrexian Praetor with Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. That's cool. You know what's really cool though? Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So this would go really well with Queso. That's not the name of the card. That's just cheese. Quasar? That's it. I think I nailed it that time. So obviously in a Quasar deck, this is kind of cute, but you can only have 1 copy of each of them out at any given time. So let's move on from what's cute and talk about what's actually good. Especially because you can't curve. I wish you could curve them into each other, but the 4 drops. So that's kind of lame. But still, just having this out on the table, well, good enough. There's multiple cards that deal, 4 damage in red to opposing creatures. This is above all of those, or any of them that might theoretically exist. So just a 5 toughness is kind of important. 4 mana 4/5s tend to be way better than 4 mana 4/4s for a reason, but the passive abilities on this card make it effectively a must kill. Quasar is just 1 damage a pop, and it doesn't really feel like much. 2 damage a pop is huge. It's twice as much. It feels way, way worse. Your opponent can effectively only draw like 10 cards with this on the table, which is a lot, yes, before they die. But even if they don't die, and it takes them drawing 3 cards to find an answer to this, well, suddenly they've taken 6 damage. Think about how like Braids curves into Invoke Despair. It's pretty sick when you think about it. Your opponent's taking a lot of damage they just cannot afford to take. But they have to draw cards. They have to draw cards to find an answer to this if they don't already have one. But every card they get deeper into their deck hurts them. And I think that's actually really good. And conversely, every turn this stays out helps you a little bit in the fight against aggro decks and stuff like that. We've seen just on cards like Environmental Sciences and stuff that 2 life is more than it sounds like. And even though you have to wait a whole turn cycle for your 2 life, it could make a big difference. So I think this card is great. I'm not sure how good it is in terms of like, it's definitely going to see standard play. I can't say that about it, but I do think, again, there's just so many cards. I think they've really hit a mark on day 1 at least here of cards that don't look broken, but boy, they look tempting. They look like a card I really want to play some Magic games with. And this is yet another one of those. So again, a good job. But we move to the last 3 mythics of the day. Let's take a look at Soulcanar. Soulcanar, Swamp Thing is back. This time he's Soulcanar the Tainted. He's 5 mana, 2, a blue, a black, and a red. Good old Grixis colors for a 5/5 legendary elemental demon. This was the elemental demon Mara was talking about. I would have not guessed that. At the beginning of your end step, choose one that hasn't been chosen. You can draw a card, or each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Or Soulcanar the Tainted deals 3 damage to up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker. Or, this is the bad one, exile Soulcanar, then return it to the battlefield under an opponent's control. The Swamp King, man. My king. My liege has returned. I've missed Soulcanar so much, and just like getting these references just making me pop, man. Like, Stone Cold came back at WrestleMania. Soulcanar's back in Standard. I am 12 years old again. Thank you, culture, for finally... This means we're old, actually. They're moving on from boomers, and now they're servicing the millennials. And that's actually bad news. I'm ancient now. But I'm going to relish it while I can. Soulcanar, the Swamp King, man. Like... It's just really cool to have a card with this name on it in Standard, even if I'm not super impressed. But I am a little impressed, I gotta say. A 5 mana 5/5 is fine stat line, but being able to, the turn it comes into play, not quite an ETB. Your opponent has time to deal with it, but still, that's fair. Fair is fair. But the turn it comes into play, it's definitely not a do nothing. You get to draw a card, which is really cool, or you can remove a creature, which is really cool too. You know, both of those modes are fine. You know, eventually you'll make them lose 2, you'll gain 2, that's whatever. And then before you have to give it to your opponent, you'll just cast Fading Hope and return it to your hand. Or you'll cast, you know, some sort of blink spell. Or maybe you'll have a teleportation circle. That's something you want something. You can blink or bounce this in some way or another. Or maybe even kill it and then reanimate it, right? Like, that seems fine too. There's a lot of ways to make sure you never have to give this to your opponent. So it's actually probably a pretty good card. Go. Oh, and even if you do have to eventually give it to your opponent, there's always the chance that they're just dead by then, because this card is pretty good, so that too. You know, it takes like 4 whole turns before you actually have to hand this over, so hopefully they're done by then. Let's move on to the next thing. Another card that I'm just super hyped to see the name of this card. It's Zur, everybody. Zur's here, the Eternal Schemer. This is 3 mana, Esper colors. For a 1/4 flyer, it's a legendary human wizard with enchantment creatures you control. Have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. Pretty good line of text there. It also has 1 and a white. Target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to its other type, and has base power and toughness each equal to its mana value. Holy mackerel. That's actually like pretty good. It's a little gimmicky, right? But even with just stuff like, you know, Borrowed Time, you know, these enchantments that remove your opponent's stuff, you take your opponent's stuff and then attack them with the thing that killed their stuff. And like, what's really cool about that is that they have hexproof. Once you make them into enchantments, at least, you know, your opponent tries to target your Borrowed Time with like a Besage or something, right? Like some sort of destroy target enchantment spell or ability. And suddenly you can just pay 2 mana at instant speed and turn your thing into a hexproof creature, so their spell fizzles or whatever. Yes, that's good enough to me, but in the meantime, your Borrowed Time attacks for 3 lifelink, Death Touch, hexproof. That's good, man. But like, even if you just play normal enchantment creatures that you don't have to animate, they still have 3 unbelievable abilities. So like, this might be just good on the commander table, the brawl screen. I hesitate to call it a table. We're getting close now. Let's take a look at Soul of Windgrace. Yo, I love this card. This is like one of my favorite cards of the day, easy. This is 1 in Jund colors, black, red, green, for a 5/4 legendary cat avatar. And when Soul of Windgrace enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. You can pay a green and discard a land to gain 3 life. You pay 1 in a red and discard a land to draw a card. For 1 in a red, that's interesting. And for 2 in a black, you can discard a land to have Soul of Windgrace gain indestructible until end of turn, and you tap it. So this is just great. You know, it's Windgrace. I've always loved Windgrace. He's a cat. I've always loved cats, you know that. I like doing weird stuff with lands out of the graveyard. This ramps you. This draws cards. That's unbelievable. I mean, I want to play it on like 7 mana. You know, I want to have 7 mana when I play this thing, obviously, but that's not going to happen most of the time. I want to be able to protect it. It's a little more expensive to protect than a Seasoned Hallowed Blade, but it's still good. This draws you cards. It continues. It's when it ETBs or attacks, so it keeps getting you lands out of the yard. It's a reasonably beefy dude. It's in a good color combination. This is a very good card, and I wish I had more to say about it. But this, beyond all the shenanigans and stuff, it just supports itself and is great. So you'll be seeing a lot of this card, I think. At least if you follow my channel, you'll definitely be seeing a lot of this card. But finally, let's talk about it. Probably the best card of the day, right? Liliana of the Veil. We all called it. I can't take credit for this one. We all called this one. It's Liliana of the Veil. She's back in Standard. What does that mean? I think it might be okay. Everyone, you know, discard a card every turn is actually kind of very good. It's the best thing about the card. It is. Everyone sacrifice a creature, or target player sacrifice a creature, also very good starting on turn 3 and happening every other turn from then. It's just like, or every turn sometimes. It's just like, this is obviously a good Planeswalker. Do I have more to say about it than that? Yes. In Standard, it will be played, it will be playable, and it will make Mono Black, it'll make up for the loss of a lot of very good cards in Mono Black. But even in 3-color like mid-range decks, this is going to see a ton of play, and this again could signal the return of mid-range decks like The Rock. Just a really difficult Planeswalker to play against, and now between this, Obnic Silas, and Ajani, there's a ton of really good 3-mana Planeswalkers that aren't quite the level of Oko or anything, but they're still pretty serious. You're going to have to look out for Planeswalkers starting on turn 3 in this format, and this is the prime suspect, to say the least. This is a lot more intimidating even than an ob. And it's, I could do a whole video about this, but my camera's flashing at me, which means that the camera's about to cut off any second. So Lily's back in standard. We all called it. It's actually happening. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we'll find out soon enough, right? But let me know how you feel about it and all the other stuff we talked about down there in the comments section. Also, make sure you're subscribed. Please subscribe if you haven't done it yet. You know, we got all of spoiler season left, and make sure you hit the bell for the notifications because this spoiler season is going to be crazy from what I can tell, and just the fact that we're back in Dominaria is exciting enough. I know I'm talking very quickly here, but I got to get through it. Camera's flashing at me. Just let me know how you felt about all this stuff. Check out the Twitch channel. Check out the Patreon. $1 a month to vote on content once we get to deck techs. All the links to that is in the description. Check all that stuff out. More spoilers and stuff down there too. Do the things. YouTube stuff, I would appreciate it if you do it. Already shaping up to be a great spoiler season. I hope you come back for more here on the channel. But that's all I got for this one. I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.